Hello everyone, and welcome to my Young and the Restless official 24 channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Sharon had always believed that after all the storms she and Nick had weathered together, there could never again be a secret big enough to tear them apart, but in true Genoa City fashion, fate had a different plan, and it struck like lightning when a mysterious woman appeared in town, a woman who seemed to know far too much about Nick's past, far too much about Sharon's history, and far too much about the Newman family's darkest moments. And it was only when Sharon found herself standing face to face with this enigmatic ex of Nick's that she realized her entire world was about to tilt on its axis, because Sharon finally learned the truth, a truth so layered and devastating that it shook the foundation of her long and complicated relationship with Nick and forced her to confront old insecurities she thought she had buried long ago. And as whispers swept through Crimson Lights and across Newman Enterprises about the stranger's arrival, Sharon pieced together fragments of a past Nick had desperately tried to keep hidden, a past tied not only to romance but also to betrayal, money, and a dangerous secret file that Victor himself had once buried. And now that the file and the woman were both out in the open, Sharon had no choice but to face the fallout, and what made it worse was the timing, because just as Sharon was finding her footing again as a counselor and a mother, just as she was beginning to believe that her life could have peace after years of chaos, Nick's ex strolled in with a confident smile, a folder tucked under her arm, and a tone that suggested she had no intention of keeping her mouth shut. And though Sharon tried at first to dismiss her as just another blast from Nick's colorful past, something in the woman's eyes made her pause, something raw and haunted, something that hinted at a bond deeper than a simple fling, and soon Sharon was confronting Nick with demands for the truth, raising her voice in the same living room where they had both confessed love and anger countless times before, but this time Nick hesitated too long, this time his silence spoke louder than any words. And Sharon knew in that instant that he had been hiding something monumental, something that directly affected her, their children, and perhaps even the future of the Newman Empire. And when the dam finally broke and Sharon discovered the truth, that Nick's ex was not merely an old girlfriend but a woman connected to a massive scheme involving Victor's business dealings and secrets from Sharon's own past, the shock rippled through her so violently she could hardly breathe, because this mysterious woman carried proof that years ago, while Sharon was battling her own demons, Nick had stepped into an affair that was not only reckless but also produced consequences he never disclosed. And though Sharon wanted to hate him for the deception, she couldn't ignore the pang of heartbreak when she realized he had kept it hidden out of fear of losing her. Yet fear was not enough to excuse the betrayal, not when Genoa City itself was buzzing with gossip and judgment, and not when her children would eventually learn the truth. So Sharon did what Sharon always does, she summoned her strength, confronted the storm head-on, and demanded answers, not just from Nick but from the ex who seemed determined to stir up the past. And as the two women clashed in the coffeehouse, voices rising, accusations flying, Sharon discovered that the ex's connection to Nick wasn't limited to romance, because buried in those secret files was proof of business dealings that put Noah and Faith at risk, dealings that involved laundering money through shell companies tied to Chancellor Winters and Newman Enterprises. And Sharon realized this was no mere love triangle, this was a conspiracy that could upend every family in town. So with tears streaming down her face and anger boiling in her veins, she confronted Victor, demanding to know why he had once allowed this woman to disappear only to re-emerge now. And in classic Victor fashion, he growled that everything he did was to protect his family, but Sharon snapped back that protecting family did not mean lying to them. And in that moment she realized she was not just a bystander in Nick's saga but a central figure in uncovering the truth, because the ex had come not only to rattle Nick but to target Sharon personally, armed with details about her marriage to Nick, her time with Adam, and even the dark chapter of her life when she struggled with her mental health. And Sharon's heart clenched as she realized this stranger had studied her life like a playbook, turning her vulnerabilities into weapons. Yet Sharon was no stranger to reinvention, no stranger to clawing her way out of the rubble of heartbreak, and so rather than retreat, she stood taller, vowing that if this woman wanted to bring chaos to Genoa City, then Sharon would meet her at every turn. But the true bombshell was still to come, because when pressed, the ex finally revealed that she wasn't just a shadow of Nick's past, she was a mother, and the child she claimed to have belonged to Nick himself. and as Sharon's breath caught and the room spun, Nick stammered, his eyes wide, his words failing, and the silence stretched on until Sharon realized the horrifying truth. The woman was telling the truth, and Nick had fathered a child he had never told her about. A child who had grown up outside of Genoa City, a child now entangled in the dangerous web of secrets that threatened to destroy them all, and with that revelation the fragile trust Sharon had rebuilt with Nick shattered, leaving her torn between anger, betrayal, and the aching desire to protect her family from yet another scandal. But in the end Sharon knew one thing with absolute clarity, that the truth, no matter how painful, had finally come to light, and now it was her turn to decide whether to walk away from Nick forever or fight to rebuild something from the ruins. Even as the mysterious ex stood smiling in the shadows, fully aware that she had changed the course of Genoa City forever, and in that moment Sharon's tears dried, her jaw tightened, and she whispered to herself that this war was only beginning, because if Genoa City thought it had seen Sharon fight before, they hadn't seen anything yet. Sharon's mind swirled as she stood frozen in the aftermath of the revelation, the weight of the truth pressing down on her chest like an anvil. But instead of retreating into silence as she once might have years ago, Sharon drew in a long, unsteady breath and told herself that she would not be defined by betrayal again, because though Nick's confession, or rather his failure to confess until now, had shattered something vital between them, she refused to allow his mysterious ex to hold all the power. And as the woman smirked across from her with the satisfaction of someone who knew she had detonated a bomb that could never be undone, Sharon squared her shoulders and made a silent vow that she would take control of this narrative, not just for herself but for her children, because if there truly was a child out there tied to Nick, then Noah, Faith, Summer, and even Christian had a right to know, and Sharon would be the one to protect them from the chaos to come. Yet even as her resolve hardened, her heart ached with the cruel familiarity of it all, Nick hiding secrets, Sharon discovering them in the worst possible way, and their love story once again bleeding out on the floor of crimson lights where so many of their battles had begun. And when Nick reached for her hand, his eyes brimming with shame and desperation, Sharon jerked away, the sting of betrayal still too raw. The image of the woman's triumphant expression burned into her mind, and as Nick pleaded for her to listen, to understand, Sharon whispered through gritted teeth that understanding required honesty, something he had failed to give her time and time again, and with that she stormed out, the bell above the coffeehouse door clanging like a death knell, leaving Nick to wrestle with the wreckage while the mysterious ex savored the damage she had inflicted. And outside on the chilly Genoa city streets, Sharon tried to gather herself, tried to keep her breathing steady, but her phone buzzed with a message from Mariah asking if she was okay, and Sharon realized with dread that the ripples of this revelation would not stay contained for long, because in a town like Genoa City, secrets spread faster than wildfire. And soon the entire Newman family would be pulled into the vortex, with Victor demanding answers, Nikki ready to defend her son, and Victoria preparing to use the scandal to her advantage, because Victoria always seized the opportunity to assert herself when Nick stumbled, and Sharon could already imagine the glares, the whispers, the pitying looks, all of it fueling her determination not to be a victim again. So instead of crumbling, she called Mariah and asked her to meet, knowing she needed allies. Knowing she needed to steady herself before the firestorm reached full force, and when she finally sat across from her daughter, Sharon confessed the truth in a halting voice, watching Mariah's face transform from shock to anger to fierce protectiveness, and Mariah immediately suggested that they dig into the ex's claims, verify whether the child truly was Nick's, and expose the ex for whatever game she was playing, because Mariah had inherited Sharon's resilience and a healthy dose of cynicism, and she wasn't about to let some stranger waltz into town and destroy their family without a fight. And though Sharon agreed, a part of her still trembled with the gnawing possibility that the woman was telling the truth, and that Nick really had fathered a child in secret. And as she considered what that meant for her family, for her relationship with Nick, for her very identity as a mother and partner, Sharon realized that the truth she had demanded might not set her free, it might just imprison her in another cycle of heartbreak. And yet she couldn't deny the spark of determination that flared in her chest, the same spark that had carried her through cancer, through losses, through betrayals, because Sharon Collins Newman Rosales was no stranger to battle, and if this mysterious ex wanted war, she had just declared it against a woman who had already survived the worst and come out stronger every time. But Sharon also knew she needed to confront Nick again, because unresolved silence was its own form of poison, so she returned to the ranch later that evening, her heels clicking like thunder on the marble floors as she entered the Newman living room, where Victor, Nikki, Victoria, and Nick himself were gathered in tense conversation, and all eyes turned to her as she strode in, and without hesitation Sharon demanded to know why none of them had told her about this woman's existence, why they had allowed her to be blindsided in front of the entire town, and Victor's steely eyes narrowed as he muttered that it wasn't her business, but Sharon snapped back that when the father of her children was at the center of a scandal that threatened their family, it became her business, and she refused to be silenced or sidelined anymore, and though Nikki pursed her lips in disdain, even she couldn't deny Sharon's right to answers, while Victoria smirked, clearly savoring the chance to watch her brother squirm, but Sharon ignored them all, focusing instead on Nick, whose silence spoke volumes, and when she demanded the truth one final time, he finally admitted through clenched teeth that yes, years ago during one of their many breakups, he had fallen into a reckless relationship with this woman, and though he had been told there was no child, he now feared he had been lied to, and as his voice broke with the weight of regret, Sharon felt a strange mixture of fury and pity, fury that he had hidden this from her, pity that he was once again caught in Victor's web of secrets, but she refused to let pity blind her, and she told Nick in no uncertain terms that whether he was the father or not, the lies had to end now, and they would find the truth together or not at all, and as she turned to leave, she caught Victor muttering about damage control and legacy, words that made Sharon pause, because it became clear that Victor had known more about this situation than he admitted, and if Victor had buried secrets about Nick's ex and her child, then Sharon realized this wasn't just a personal betrayal, it was another Newman cover-up with far-reaching consequences, and that realization ignited a new fire inside her, because if the Newmans thought she would stand quietly by while they orchestrated another charade, they were sorely mistaken, and Sharon swore to herself that this time she would uncover every lie, expose every deception, and protect her family no matter what it cost, even if it meant destroying whatever was left between her and Nick, because the truth was no longer just about her heart, it was about justice, survival, and reclaiming the strength she had almost forgotten she possessed. Sharon didn't sleep that night, tossing and turning in her bed while the shadows of memory clawed at her, memories of all the times she had forgiven Nick, all the times she had taken him back after betrayals, lies, or impulsive choices, and though her heart ached with the familiar pull of love, her mind screamed at her that this time had to be different, that she couldn't allow herself to be blindsided again, and so when morning came and the sun poured through her curtains, Sharon rose with steel in her spine and resolve in her veins, because if Nick and his family thought they could bury this mess under more secrets and corporate maneuvering, she would prove them wrong, and the first step was to confront the source, the mysterious ex herself, so Sharon marched to the Grand Phoenix, where the woman was staying, her heels echoing across the marble lobby floor, drawing stares from guests who already whispered about the drama unraveling in Genoa City, and when Sharon knocked on the door of the ex's suite, there was no hesitation, no fear, only determination in her eyes, and when the door swung open, revealing the ex draped in a silk robe with a smirk playing on her lips, Sharon wasted no time with pleasantries and demanded answers, her voice low but steady, and the woman, clearly reveling in the power she held, invited her in with an almost mocking wave of her hand, pouring herself a glass of champagne as though she had already won, but Sharon didn't flinch, didn't let her guard down, instead cutting straight to the chase. If there was a child, Sharon wanted proof, and she wasn't leaving until she got it, and for a moment the woman hesitated, her smile faltering, and Sharon saw the flicker of uncertainty in her eyes, which only fueled her suspicion that this wasn't just a game, that there was something real behind the claims, and finally, with a sigh that was equal parts annoyance and triumph, the ex revealed that she did have a son, a teenager, and she was prepared to bring him to Genoa City if necessary, and Sharon's heart clenched at the thought of another innocent being pulled into the Newman vortex, but she didn't let her compassion show, instead she insisted on a DNA test, right there and then, because she wasn't about to let more weeks of lies poison the air, and though the ex smirked again, she agreed, clearly confident that the results would prove her claims, and Sharon wasted no time arranging for the test at Memorial Hospital, calling in every favor she could to ensure it would be handled quickly and discreetly, though in Genoa City nothing ever remained discreet for long, and sure enough, By the time Sharon returned to the hospital later that day with the ex in tow, word had already reached Nick, Victor, and half the town, and the waiting room buzzed with tension as eyes followed them, whispers flew, and speculation spread like wildfire, because nothing captivated Genoa City like a scandal with a Newman at its center, and when Nick stormed in, demanding to know what Sharon was doing, she stood her ground, telling him in front of everyone that she was tired of secrets, tired of lies, and if he wouldn't take responsibility, she would, because the truth mattered more than protecting his pride, and though his face flushed with shame, he didn't stop her, didn't fight her, and that silence spoke volumes, making Sharon realize that deep down Nick feared the results as much as she did, and when the ex finally emerged from the lab with a sly grin, Sharon's heart raced, her palms clammy, but she didn't back down, not even when the ex leaned close and whispered that soon Sharon would no longer be the most important woman in Nick's life, because Sharon refused to let jealousy win. Making Sharon realize that deep down Nick feared the results as much as she did, and when the ex finally emerged from the lab with a sly grin, Sharon's heart raced, her palms clammy, but she didn't back down, not even when the ex leaned close and whispered that soon Sharon would no longer be the most important woman in Nick's life, because Sharon refused to let jealousy win, refused to let this woman's barbs wound her, and instead she focused on the bigger picture, the test, the truth, the impact on her children, and she told herself that no matter the result, she would face it head-on, because Sharon Collins had faced death, illness, betrayal, and loss, and she would face this too. But when the results were finally ready and the doctor called them into the office, the world seemed to slow, every heartbeat echoing in Sharon's ears as the envelope was handed over, and the ex's smile widened as though she already knew the answer, and Nick sat rigid, his hands clasped, his knuckles white, while Sharon stood tall, refusing to falter, and when the envelope was opened and the words confirmed that Nick Newman was indeed the biological father of the ex's son, a hush fell over the room, the kind of silence that carried more weight than any scream, and Sharon felt her breath catch, her knees threatened to buckle, because though she had braced for it, the confirmation still sliced through her like a blade, and the ex, triumphant, reached for her phone, already plotting her next move, while Nick whispered Sharon's name, his voice cracking with regret, but Sharon turned away, her heart a storm of grief, betrayal, and fury, and she walked out of the hospital without a word, the whispers of onlookers chasing her down the hall, and outside, as the cool autumn air hit her face, she let a single tear fall before wiping it away, telling herself that this was not the end, not for her, not for her family, because if Nick thought she would crumble, he was wrong, if his ex thought she had won, she was wrong, because Sharon knew something they didn't, strength born of survival, resilience forged in fire, and she would use every ounce of it now, not just to protect herself but to protect the children she already had, the life she had built, and perhaps even the boy who had unknowingly been pulled into this mess, because Sharon had always had a soft spot for the innocent, and though she loathed the woman standing behind him, she couldn't bring herself to hate the child who bore none of the blame, and as she walked away, her phone buzzed again, this time with a message from Adam, who had clearly already heard the news, offering to meet her, and for a fleeting moment Sharon wondered if history was repeating itself yet again, if in her lowest moment she was being pulled back toward the dangerous gravitational pull of Adam Newman, but she quickly shoved the thought aside, reminding herself that this was not about old patterns, it was about facing the truth. And she would do so on her terms, even if it meant standing against the entire Newman family, because Sharon finally knew that the truth, no matter how devastating, was better than another lifetime of lies, and this time she wouldn't let anyone, not Nick, not Victor, not his ex, dictate her story ever again.